All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emily Simpson with Select Path. Welcome back to our Exemplify series. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday season, a great start to the 2024 year. I am especially excited to introduce our speaker today. So, Gracey of Growing You is going to be discussing some practical strategies to stay calm, when work and life are feeling heavy, which we thought was going to be a really relevant subject, especially coming out of the end of 2023. So really when the weight of everything piles on our shoulders, it can feel hard, if not nearly impossible, to show up for ourselves and our family and our work in a way that feels good. So with that being said, I'm very excited to introduce Michelle and have her begin our seminar today. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Thank you so much for having me here today. I am so excited and so honored to be here and have the opportunity to share some practical tools that help us manage the stress of everything when the weight of everything is piling on heavy. And I find particularly, especially this time of year, when the winter seems to be dreading on. So if you have a pen and paper handy, that would be awesome, as I would love if you could walk away with some personalized tools that you can refer back to in those hard moments. There's one tool in particular that I am so excited to share with you, as it has completely changed my life, just understanding this one thing alone. And of course, feel free, if you have any questions or any comments or anything, feel free to pop them in the chat and let's dive in. Okay, so before diving in, my name is Michelle Gracey. I am the founder of Growing You, an e-commerce brand that is so passionate about creating products for mothers that bring intentionality, compassion, and joy into our day-to-day lives. I'm a mom who had to overcome my own challenges. The information that I share with you today is information that I've heavily researched and obtained through working with other experts in the field and have personally benefited from over the last 4 years. I initially spent the first 15 years of my career as a financial planner. Then when I had my daughter, I decided to jump into the e-commerce space, because what better time than when you're completely sleep deprived with a new baby? And it was through my journey in becoming a mother while transitioning into e-commerce that I discovered I was living in a state of complete dysregulation. I was so overcome by anxiety, stress, and overwhelm that I no longer felt like myself. I would go from 0 to 100 in a second. I always felt on edge and would startle easily, had constant brain fog. I hated how I felt, but I didn't know how to change it. I felt like I was doing everything I should be doing, like exercising, eating healthy, staying hydrated, but nothing really seemed to work. I invested a ton of time and money into courses and resources to better understand what was happening beneath the surface. And in discovering how powerful these tools were for me, I became so passionate and wanted to share these with everyone and anyone who was interested. So a quick overview of the key points that I wanted to share today are: 1, understanding what our window of tolerance is and what's happening beneath the surface. 2, awareness of our early body cues and what brings us outside of that ideal window. And then 3, practical strategies that help us get back into that window when we have become triggered. And lastly, how do we expand our capacity to hold more so that we can stay in that optimal ideal window more often? I also wanted to touch on why I believe this is so important, as studies now show how many of us are living in chronic states of stress and often don't even realize it. We feel so overwhelmed by the little triggers through the day, like rushing the kids to school, rushing off to work, and then responding to clients, or maybe we have a conflict that we're dealing with at work, rushing home to cook dinner and get the kids to bed. The body starts to rely on these stress hormones, creating an addictive loop where stress and overwhelm can begin to feel normal until feeling this way becomes a habit, meaning that when we don't feel this way, we then go create it. The problem is that these stress hormones can draw from our energy source, leaving us feeling depleted and taking a toll on our health over the long term. Building emotional resilience is the key to manage our stress effectively, when we have the capacity to recover from these stressors in a healthy way. When we're in our optimal window, we feel more at ease, we feel better able to handle these stressors. We feel more present, connected. We tend to think more clearly. We feel more creative and playful. Whereas when we're outside of that ideal window, we tend to feel on edge, anxious, bothered more easily, which of course doesn't feel great, and well worth the time investing the time and energy into finding effective tools that help us manage everything well. So I really want to briefly just want to touch on what the window of tolerance is, as it really helps us understand what's happening beneath the surface of our nervous system. So the nervous system is responsible for all of our automatic reactions. It cools us down when we're hot. It heats us up if we're cold. It protects us if we're feeling under threat. Our window of tolerance refers to our optimal state when our nervous system is balanced and we can handle stress well. So we typically feel more content and connected, in flow state. We can think more clearly. We feel optimistic. It's the ideal place to be, but not always realistic that we can be there all the time. We're going to move in and out of that window all day long. For example, if someone cuts us off in traffic, and generally, it gets more narrow. Our window of tolerance gets more narrow as the day goes on, meaning that when we get triggered, we can get triggered a lot more easily. So when we deviate too far outside of this window, we can move into a hyperarousal, our fight or flight response, or a hypoarousal. So hyperarousal is our fight or flight response, sympathetic fight or flight response, where we tend to feel more worried, overwhelmed, agitated easily. Whereas our hypoarousal is our parasympathetic freeze response, which is quite the opposite of hyperarousal, where we can get stumped by something that someone said or shut down more easily. We may have spiraling thoughts that leave us feeling stuck or unable to think clearly. And it's important to note that this is a completely normal response. It's not about being in this calm Zen state all the time. We're human. We're going to have our moments, but rather, how do we regulate back to balanced after the fact? The problem arises when we get stressed and we stay stressed. If we don't have ways to regulate back to balance, we can get into a high resting baseline of fight or flight activity. So when we are at rest, we still feel anxious and on edge, which can, of course, take a toll on our health over the long term. And it's not a great place. We generally don't want to, doesn't feel great. So I want to share a 3-step plan on one, how do we catch ourselves when we're moving outside of this window, this optimal window? And how do we catch it earlier than later so we don't deviate too far outside of it? And then some practical tools to get back into the window. And then lastly, how do we widen that window so we have the capacity to hold more? When we feel in more control over our own emotional reactivity, the world around us feels lighter. We feel lighter. We generally feel happier, more connected, and more present human beings. So this is a really busy slide, but this is the one tool that has literally changed my life. Once I understood this, it changed everything for me. There would be so many times I would go from 0 to 100 in a second before I even had a chance to stop it, no matter how hard I tried. And it was so frustrating because when I would look back and think, what would I do differently or how would I change it? I couldn't think of anything because it happened so fast. Learning how to recognize those early body cues far earlier than I ever realized changed everything for me. It can often feel like we go from 0 to 100. However, it's likely because we're missing a lot of those early cues, like an hour earlier, or even sometimes 2 hours earlier. So step 1 is becoming ultra aware of those cues before they escalate and our logical minds go offline. The anger scale helps us get clarity in what thoughts, feelings, what thoughts we usually have, and how we may feel, what we usually may do, and what body sensations we may have. It's also really helpful if you can anticipate what are those top 1 to 2 triggers right now. So even if you have your pen and paper handy, it may be helpful to think about, those 1 to 2 things that happen most often. We can anticipate them ahead of time and visualize yourself getting triggered and how you would feel in that moment, and then how we would respond. Even using tapping into our 5 senses, like what do you see? What do you hear? What does your body feel like? What's the tone of your voice? Are you tense or is it relaxed? And the fun part is that we will typically get plenty of chances to practice this, especially if you have little ones that are still learning emotional regulation. So going through this really briefly, 0 would be when we're content in our optimal window of tolerance, when we feel more relaxed. Then 1 to 2, we're becoming more irritated. We may think, here we go again. We may start to feel uneasy, give short replies or avoid. We might feel slightly anxious or have that pit in your stomach. And then you're moving into a 3 or 4, where you're starting to get really annoyed, thinking, leave me alone. I feel annoyed, irritated. You may start to get really defensive or nitpicking. You may crave things that help you feel better, like a glass of wine, comfort food, or maybe social media, like scrolling through your phone is another big one. And then 5 or 6, we move into 5 or 6, where we start to take things personally. We have that urge to teach a lesson. I'm not going to let them talk to me that way. They're going to learn. Might have wanted to stop, feel disrespected. Maybe you really want to get your point across, might start yelling, might feel hot and bothered and tense, like a lot of upper body tension. And then we move past that tipping point where we're so overcome by such a strong urge and sensation in our body that it's hard to manage. We've gone past that point. We might start yelling, slamming doors or drawers, the urge to smash something. We've completely gone offline. Might start clenching your fists or pacing back and forth. This slide is really similar to the last one, but I really want to drive home how important this part is, and probably one of the hardest parts, because this is when the logical mind tends to go offline, and we often miss those cues. So if you want to jot down any that feel familiar for you, if you can think of any on the top of your head, it might be helpful to have that to refer back to at a later date. But when you feel that urge to react, if you can simply do nothing else but pause and observe what's going on inside, what thoughts you're having. This is so powerful. I promise you, you will learn something new about yourself. The more space we can create between the trigger and our response to it, the more clearly we can think and rationally we can think. Often we think that we need to respond right away, but that's often not the case. So a couple of examples. So when we're in a fight response, having that urge to teach a lesson is a huge cue to pause. Just take a moment to just pause. Might use our tools to reset and regulate, or rushing around, that sense of urgency. Maybe you're multitasking, cooking dinner, checking emails, and doing dishes, like rushing around. That's a big one. Engaging in power struggles. So flight response would be that urge to escape. Maybe you want to run around and do laundry or run to the bathroom, like instead of dealing with someone that at the office or a customer or client, that urge to escape or avoid or ignore, thinking I just don't have this in me right now. I can't deal with this right now. Compassion fatigue, maybe, I don't know, someone hurts themselves and you just roll your eyes and thinking like, you just don't have that empathy in you. Freeze response, where we're shutting down and we can't think clearly. We're drawing blanks. Again, craving things like zoning it on the phone. So once we've noticed that we're starting to become triggered, it's so important to check in with ourselves to see if there's anything that we may need. So here, again, if you want to jot down any that you find are more common for you in your day. So for example, I find like I get in working with something and then I forget to eat lunch, and end of the day and I'm like, realize I've barely eaten anything other than, breakfast. And I wonder why I'm so snappy. Or if you want to take a screenshot, I'm happy to send it along if anyone would like, whatever works. But so how well we can tolerate stress and triggers or the people around us will often vary depending on how well we're meeting our own needs. So maybe it's that we've left it too long to eat and our blood sugar levels are low, or we've barely drank any water all day and we're now completely dehydrated, or we're up late watching Netflix, then up 5 times with the kids and just need to take it easy on ourselves today. Or maybe it's a trigger that has a strong emotional charge that requires some more processing and support to heal through. But it's really helpful to be aware of what those are, like the most common ones for us, so that we can then strategize a plan to help make sure that those don't go unmet for too long. So practical strategies to get back into our window. The second step is leaning on our tools to help us reset and regulate back to balance. Tools don't fix our problems or make them go away, but they do certainly help manage our response to them in a healthy way. It's not about never getting triggered. It's about building emotional resilience, getting to a place where we can manage our emotional reactivity more often than not, and how fast the body comes back into balance rather than staying in that chronic stress response. So tools can be used to either downregulate when we're feeling overwhelmed, angry, or frustrated, or they can help us upregulate if we're feeling drained and really low energy and lethargic. So here's a toolbox of ideas to start with if you want to write down 1 to 2 new ones that you can commit to trying even this week. I'll just touch on a few that can be really effective and can be done just about anywhere. So grounding is a powerful tool using our 5 senses to redirect our focus. So you can even do it right now if you want. You could look at 5 things that you see, 4 things that you feel or can touch. So maybe it's your clothes or your surroundings, or maybe how do you feel inside? Check in with yourself, do a body scan. 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. It's also really helpful if you can do this near a window where you can look outside, or better yet, go outside and get a little bit of nature. Look at some birds or squirrels or trees. Nature is also super healing. Progressive muscle relaxation is also a very powerful and easy one to practice just about anywhere and gives us a very powerful feeling of relaxation. Side note, kids also really love this, especially if they're in that hitting stage where they don't have quite control over their emotional regulation, where they can become overwhelmed by that strong sensation in their body. So all you simply do is squeeze your muscles for 10 seconds. So you can either do your whole body all at once, or you can do a body scan where you go from your facial muscles, your upper body, squeezing your shoulders up and then back, core, down to your glutes, legs, toes, and then just counting to 10 really slowly. And then, of course, breath work is so powerful. It disarms and regulates our central nervous system. It releases tension, clears our mind, and regulates our stress hormones. The key with breathing, especially if you're in a moment where you're really triggered by something, we tend to breathe very shallow, I can't say that word right now, shallow. But the trick is to breathe very deep into our diaphragm, our core area, and expanding our rib cage, and then moving the breath up to our chest and releasing it slowly. Even if it's possible, if you have a moment to lay down somewhere, maybe this is at home, not at the office, but I find it so much easier when you can lay down and really get that deep breath into your core. 2 to 3 of these can completely reset you. And then, of course, listening to calming music, chugging a glass of cold water can also help downregulate us, or uplifting music and movement if we want to upregulate. I also have these, red, it would be for in the moment to reset and regulate. So here's a bunch of things that you could try to reset and regulate in the moment. Or green is if we're maintaining our calm and balanced nervous system, things that we want to practice throughout the week. And then after the fact, to help us process, and then kind of slow things down and slow and steady. So, and lastly, the third step, how do we widen our window of tolerance so that we have the capacity to hold more and we aren't as easily triggered or stressed? So the first step really is awareness, awareness of what's happening beneath the surface, awareness of those early body cues that we are starting to become stressed, and awareness of personal tools that work well for you, because everyone really is different. And what may work well one day may not work well the other day or another day. So it's nice to have a wide variety of things that you can lean on. And then this one is really big, bringing awareness to that one thing that's taking up the most real estate in your mind right now. The thing we put off the most often leaks the most stress in all areas of our life. It has that ripple effect. So what's causing the most stress or frustration in your life right now? Maybe it's every evening is a marathon, just trying to get the kids to bed, or paying off a high credit card bill after Christmas when things are so expensive right now. Whatever it is, create a plan and schedule a non-negotiable appointment with yourself this week to tackle it head on. Even having a ritual where, once a week where you can just check in to see, okay, what's the one thing causing the most stress right now and how are you going to tackle it? But take that hour to address it and make a plan, refine it, tweak it as often as you need to until it's no longer causing you any extra stress and weighing heavy on your shoulders. Another one may be finding ways to enjoy parts of the day that we don't enjoy as much. So for example, it could be creating a fun little evening ritual that you love when you come home from work, that signals your brain that it's time to tap into that relaxed and playful part of you, but leaving work at work and being present wherever you are. So even turning on some music, light a candle or diffuser, make a nice soothing tea or glass of wine. Set the kids up with a snack and activity to keep them busy so that you have a chance to decompress. And then schedule some quality playtime together or some board games for a certain time so they aren't at you first thing when you get home. Or you can have them join in if it's something that they can help with too, like making dinner or whatnot. Jump to the... And then lastly, it would be getting your daily dose of things that bring you joy and increase your happy hormones. Again, feel free to add one new one if you feel that you're drawn to any. But when we prioritize taking care of ourselves first, it overflows into every other aspect of our lives. We become happier, kinder, more loving and patient people with ourselves and with everyone around us. So a few maybe regular meditation increases our dopamine levels by 65%. Sorry, I forgot to mention daily dose of joy. So dose standing for all of our happy chemicals. So dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Meditation is one that increases, I think almost all of them, increases by 65%. Connection with loved ones and massages reduce stress hormones. Listening to music has a calming effect on our brain. 2 to 3 minutes of cold showers has longer lasting benefits and effects compared to caffeine. And then 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight a day increases serotonin and vitamin D. Exercise and laughter and crying all release endorphins. And if you're like me and sometimes find it hard to find new hobbies or things that, bring that or fill that cup, you could try something like a monthly try something new challenge until you find those hobbies that you love. I think that's how I discovered yoga was like so powerful in resetting and calming the nervous system. Yeah, just put it in the calendar and every month just try something new and see if there's any that stick. So just to recap really quickly, we touched on one, what the window of tolerance is and how to catch ourselves earlier when we're becoming triggered. Two, practical tools to reset and regulate back to balance. And then how do we widen our window of tolerance? At the end of the day, we're going to have our moments. It's a reality of the human experience. It can be tempting to sweep things under the rug and forget it happened, but there's so much magic that can happen in the power of repair and self-compassion. When we lose our cool, it doesn't make us bad people. It just makes us a human that was overcome by a very strong emotion in a really hard moment. It's hard to do good when we feel bad about ourselves. Our thoughts are so powerful, and they play a huge role in how we feel. The more that we beat ourselves up for having a hard moment, the more likely it is that it can keep us stuck in those cycles. Lasting changes really do happen when we can end those negative spirals and replace it with self-compassion. And of course, it's going to take so much practice. So that was a lot of information packed in here, but I hope that you were able to take at least 1 to 2 nuggets with you that may help support you in your day-to-day. And again, thank you so much for having me here today, and for your time. It's so valuable, and I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Michelle. We're going to open the floor to some questions. Before I read any through the chat, I have some myself for you. So I really loved the content. A lot of it I feel like really resonated, even concepts I've maybe never heard before. But when some of the things when you're talking about how to identify those early signs, I personally speaking am definitely a person that I know that if I don't eat food, it starts to lead me closer from that 0 to 100, and the concept of being maybe like a little bit hangry, I will admit. But a lot of that resonated with me. So a few questions is how would you recommend, especially maybe somebody who is in a career where, they put a lot of, when you talk about compassion fatigue, let's say they're experiencing a lot of compassion fatigue at work. Are there any methods that you recommend for people on how to keep that kind of isolated to work and to still be able to have that empathy when you're at home with your family?
I would say like allowing space and journaling would be a really good tool to process. I know for everyone's different, right? So it could be social support where maybe you're leaning on some people to talk through it. I know for me, journaling, it can really slow down your mind because I find our mind can race a lot. And it really gives you that space to slow things down and to process. I'm always amazed at how much comes up. Like I think that I know the answer before I start, and I start and I'm amazed at how much comes up in like different angles and perspectives that I would have never really thought of before. But I think it's really important there's something there that needs to come up. So giving yourself that time and space to let it, to process it. Um, Gratitude is another really good one. I don't even think I included that in any of the tools, but I find gratitude is another really good one. If there's something or someone maybe that is not causing, but you're finding that it's maybe more triggering, having like thinking about like 3 things that you do admire about that person or that thing, or like trying to find the good in it can also really help to reshift that focus.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then as a mother, how do you help, little ones learn to help regulate their emotions? And you kind of brought that up in the slide, but are there any practices or methods that you found that family really enjoys or that you've seen with your clients to be really effective?
Modeling, which I know can feel heavy from personal experience, I'm speaking, but modeling, but also knowing that practice and that children don't need perfect parents to like it's so when we have a hard moment, if we can talk through it, the power of repair after the fact, like if we have maybe lost it on our little one, um, and just even acknowledging that like maybe it wasn't them that you like just expressing how you feel and what's on your mind, being open. I know it's hard depending on how old they are too. I mean, they might not have the capacity for that, but if we can try to explain to them like that it's not necessarily them, but it's also things that we're processing, um, but also like just modeling the repair and apologizing to them after the fact. And then using your tools. Like if you can show, I know now my little one she uses the progressive muscle relaxation, but sometimes when I'm starting to get a little bit worked up, she'll remind me because I've had so many conversations with her about it now.
That's really sweet. That's really awesome. I'm going to look at the chat. So just as a reminder, this will be recorded, and those of us who have participated today will have access to it. We will be hosting another Exemplify in February, and if any questions come up, after today, or you've had some thought about it and you'd really like to look to Michelle for some extra advice, please do not hesitate to reach out and connect with her. That being said, thank you everyone for joining us today. Michelle, it was amazing to have you join us as well and to start off the 2024 year, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.